Vaqtinglarni chiqarib qatnashganinglarga bek rahmat. Saniyam Oğuz bo'libmi. So much for you guys to have take your time to give us a speech today. I think actually a lot of people are interested. I saw it on Facebook. There were 81 people were going, but as Mehmet Imanaka said, like a lot of people are from Turkey maybe, so they're gonna watch it later. But and thanks again. So we will start right away. So if you guys can introduce yourself first, it would be great for those people who didn't know you. So I think maybe Saniyam goes first.
Assalamu alaikum and Uyghurca onto get and so I'm really bad. Hi everyone, my name is Saniya. I am currently a student at the University of Missouri, Kansas City School of Medicine. Hi, Dad. He's here too, so.
Yes, Ma.
Yoshi. I just spoke to you on the phone an hour ago, so. Take it away. We're good.
All right. Oğuz.
Oh, okay, sorry, I didn't know it was my turn. Oh yeah, my name is Oğuz. I grew up here. I was born in the United States, grew up in Northern Virginia, where most of the other Uyghurs are from. And currently I'm a second year in the osteopathic med school here in NYT. So, and yeah, I'm super excited for this talk. I think that we both can offer different perspectives and advice, and hopefully we can benefit everyone that's listening, inshallah.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, now if you guys can talk to us like a little bit about your high school experience, like was it busy, stressful, or like any fun things?
Yeah, I can go first. So I would say I actually had a pretty busy high school schedule. I did a lot of extracurriculars and a lot of activities. What I will say is that it's really important, I think, in high school to do quality over quantity. So it doesn't really, can everybody hear me? I think someone just said they couldn't hear me. Okay. Yeah, I think it's really important for quality over quantity. So the number of extracurriculars doesn't necessarily matter. It's more what you do in them and what you achieve in them. So, I mean, I was a part of speech and debate and musical theater. Those two were things that kept me sane and, were fun for me. But within those, I excelled, or at least tried to excel on, a state and national level. And I think that's really important to just show that you've got, commitment to one extracurricular and you're really, excelling in that one area. That's probably better than, having 25 different things on your, on your resume. So I would say that was kind of my high school experience. And of course, doing well in your classes. And I don't think I took as many AP classes as my peers did. I think by the time I graduated, I took, like 10 AP classes. And again, it more matters about quality over quantity. Really, how you do in those classes, not how many you take. I think that's really important.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Saniya on the concept of quality over quantity. You want to have a passion, you want to be pursuing something, and you want to really demonstrate that in your college applications. For me, it was a few things. I think first off, my whole life was based on the East Turkestan Dawa, and growing up, going to protests, going to lobbying events, conferences, everything was just surrounded around that. So my whole identity was based on this idea of, being a first generation Uyghur, and whatnot. So a lot of my time outside of school was based on that. Otherwise, I was just playing basketball, having fun. And I would like to say one thing, regarding AP classes, I wasn't the smartest or brightest kid. I actually struggled in a lot of my classes, but I forced myself to take as many APs as possible. Because what you'll find in these in high schools is that the better teachers are in AP classes, the students that are aiming for top colleges in AP class, when you surround yourself with them, they tend to, you know, bring you up also, and then you'll get as much help as you need. So like, I would say never be afraid to take AP classes, just take all of them, you know, and even if you get a B or A, it looks way better than just normal classes. And I think that definitely helped me get to, you know, undergraduate college as well.
Okay, thank you. So while being busy with your high school and like attending all of the activities that you're doing, so how did you manage your time? So do you have a time management strategy that you think worthwhile spreading or sharing with everybody?
Oqush, do you want to go first?
You can go first, Tanya.
Okay, so, I mean, what I will say is that high school for me, I might not be the best person to talk about it just because although I was busy in high school, what you encounter in high school will never be what you encounter in college. It will just not amount to the amount of work that you're going to do in medical school. There's no comparison. And so managing time in high school was not, you know, not as hard, I think, as managing time in medical school. What I will say is that you've got your parents, which are huge. My parents were a huge support system for me. You know, my dad made me write lists all the time. I think that's something that really helped me is organization, and making sure that, you know, you're just on top of things, making sure you're organized, making sure you have a schedule. I think that's really important. I think making sure that you have everything set out during the day. If you're not a person that can follow schedules, that's totally okay. Then just having, you know, a to-do list of the things that you've got to do that day and just checking off those things. That's really important. But those are skills that are really important to build early on, because once you build them in high school, they're, you know, they lay a really good foundation for later. And I guess I should have said this before, and I apologize for everyone. So I'm a little bit different than Oqush. Am I saying your name right? Okay. Yeah. I have a little bit of a different path than he has. He's a second year in an osteopathic medical school, which is different than an allopathic medical school. So he's getting his DO, I'm getting my MD. Very similar. He actually learns a couple of extra things that I wish I could learn in my, you know, curriculum. But they're both physicians. I'm in my last year of medical school, so I'll graduate in May, and then I'll be going off to residency. So kind of just, you know, in my program, it's not, you don't do your undergrad and then apply for medical school. You actually just get accepted into medical school, and then it's 6 years, so it's shorter. So I would say that my high school experience really centered around preparing me to go into an accelerated program. And I would say that's kind of the only difference. You know, making sure that you're organized, making sure that you're, you know, goal-oriented. I think those are the big things for, you know, making sure that you're prepared in high school.
Okay, thank you. How about yours?
Yeah, so in high school, I feel like in high school, you should definitely have a lot of free time. You know, don't stress yourself out too much. Sonia is preparing for accelerated programs, so it's a little different. But for me, I know I had so much free time, you know, just hanging out with friends, doing other extracurriculars, playing basketball. You want to make sure you have a healthy experience and sort of develop yourself in high school. So, you know, don't be too stressed out. Just focus on trying to get good grades, you know, doing well on the standardized test, and then having that passion or one or two things that you excel at, and then base your application based on that. Now, in undergrad, you know, my experience is a little different too. You know, you kind of adjust, you develop some time management techniques. It's mainly prioritizing, but it wasn't too bad. But med school is definitely the highest workload. It's not as challenging, but the quantity is a lot. So you definitely have to sort of pace yourself and manage your time well. But it's something you develop over time. So I wouldn't say, you know, worry about it right now if you're in high school. Definitely not.
Okay, thank you. So Sanya was talking about her dad supporting her, asking her to list all the stuff she wants to do. So my next question is, how did your parents support you? And what do you think about your like parents support? How can they support you?
So having parent support is huge. It's so important. I cannot stress that enough. I know as a high schooler, I hated it. I absolutely hated it. My parents, you know, they pushed me really hard. They were always kind of on me. And now that I am where I am, I look back and I realize, wow, you know, that was very important for me. They were also really good, though, I think, at making sure there was a good balance. My dad, I think, realized that, you know, he couldn't constantly be helicoptering over me because, unfortunately, when you're in high school, if your parents do that all the time, you're going to go the opposite direction. You're not going to want to do anything. You're not going to want to get anything done. So there was a really good balance of making sure that, you know, my needs were met as far as hanging out with my friends and doing things that I thought were fun, like, you know, musical theater and debate, and then also making sure I had good grades. My mom was really good in making sure I made it on time to everything that I needed to. She drove me everywhere until I had gotten a car, and I mean, that was a big thing for me. I think both of them just being supportive of having so many activities, of doing well in school, but not also allowing they also allowed me to fail a little bit. I mean, I didn't do that great on every single exam. I mean, there were definitely exams where, you know, I got a C and I came home with a C and they were upset that I got a C, but it wasn't the end of the world. You know, you just work harder and then get an A on the next test. So I think parent support is very, very important. And if you don't have it, it sometimes can be the difference between, you know, being motivated enough to go into medical school or going into a really good undergraduate program, like Cornell. You know, that's really important. So I think that parental support is key.
Okay.
I agree 100%. You know, everything Sanyam said, you know, my parents did for me as well. Now I know certain, you know, backgrounds, we come from all different backgrounds, but one thing I hear a lot of kids making excuses on is, oh, you know, I have to work part-time. I have to, it's not an excuse, it's a reality, right? And I felt the same way a lot of times too, but, you know, parents play a huge role in lifting that burden off their kids. You know, like me understanding that I could go to a good college and not have to pay that, basically because there's scholarships, there's financial aid, right? So this is a huge aspect that my parents sort of made known to me, is that if you want, you know, to go to a good college, you have to get in the best college as you can, so that, you know, we're not further in a financial situation, or because paying for college is tough. So that's a huge thing. You know, you want to dedicate basically all your time to studies. And obviously I got the support from my parents. I was able to sort of focus 100% on that most of my time in high school. Obviously, you know, later on, senior year, you get more relaxed and you pick up a job here and there to make some money. But I think just that's one other piece of advice I want to say. Don't worry about that kind of stuff, because when you're investing all your time in trying to get to a good college, you are technically working, and you don't have to, and that will return to you when you're in college, if that makes sense.
Well, I'll add, my parents were really against me having a job in high school and in college. I mean, when I say against, like, did not want me to have it under no circumstances, because that work experience, unless it's a work experience, especially if you're going into medical school, if it's a work experience where you're working in a nursing home, or, you know, you're working as a scribe in an emergency room, unless it's a job like that, it's not helping you. It's not helping you towards your goals. It's really just there for you to make money. And that's great. But, you know, the medical school debt, sometimes it's almost better to just, you know, take the debt and not work and have more time to study than it is to, you know, work a job that doesn't really contribute towards your goals. So that was really important for me. I think we would have rather taken out some extra loans than for me to, you know, have a job and then potentially have less time studying. You'll see a lot of kids in medical school actually don't have jobs. It's pretty rare for people to have jobs in medical school. I have one friend who works on the weekends, every weekend. And she, at one point was really struggling. So I think that, you know, those are kind of, those are things to think about. Sometimes it's just better to, you know, eat the loans than it is to get a job and then, you know, risk not getting as good of grades.
Okay, thank you. My another question is, what kind of preparation students need to have before to have get a better chance get into the medical school? Is there any kind of like typical classes or curriculum you do at high school before you apply for a medical school that helps you to have a better chance applying?
So I can't talk much about the MCAT because I didn't have to take the MCAT. I was very lucky. My program just, you get accepted right out of high school, so you just take the ACT or the SAT. Actually, I think my program only accepts the ACT right now. I would say that on level of importance, your ACT and your SAT are probably the most important if you're not taking the MCAT. If you are taking the MCAT, that is 100% the most important test. What you do in high school really does not affect you when you're applying, I think, for medical school if you've already gotten an undergraduate degree. It affects you somewhat, but what you took in high school will have no bearing on what you need to then apply for your postgraduate degree, because no one will, or sorry, for your graduate degree, because no one in medical school admissions is going to dock you for getting a B in AP Bio when you were in high school. They're going to be more focused on how you did on, advanced bio as an undergrad. But I definitely think the MCAT is more important, and you can probably talk more about that, but I probably can't.
Yeah, so if you are taking the traditional paths from high school to undergraduate college, and then from undergraduate to applying to medical school, and first and foremost, I think positioning yourself in a good school is important, right? But when you're applying to medical school, it doesn't matter what undergraduate school you go to, and I've seen it all the time. People from community colleges, people from normal state schools, people from top schools, they all end up in the same place. What matters at that point is, as Sanyam said, your MCAT, right? MCAT is probably the most important thing next to your GPA. And when it comes to applying to med school, numbers do mean a lot compared to applying to undergraduate school. So in undergrad school, they look at more like extracurriculars, they want to see you as a whole person. And they do that in med school as well. But if you don't have the numbers for it, if you don't have a good GPA, and you don't have good science GPA, you don't have a good research background, you don't have your MCAT, they're not going to even look at you. So that's the biggest advice I can give. When you're in undergrad college, you want to focus on those 4 things. Obviously, you want to be a whole person, you want to have your passions, you want to do sports, whatever, politics, anything you want to do. But that's something from my own experience I learned, because I took a whole non-traditional path and I made a lot of mistakes in college. And I realize now, if I just had gotten a better score or just a little better GPA, or, and I would have ended up somewhere else. But, alhamdulillah, I'm also happy with my situation right now. But I can definitely give more advice based on my experiences later on.
Okay, thank you.
I will say, just kind of, if anyone out there is in high school and they're interested in going to an accelerated program like I did, your ACT and your SAT are going to be super important. And I think the biggest support that I had was my dad. He forced me to take multiple ACTs in a row for years, to the point that I was so sick of it. But in the end, it ended up being super, super helpful, and the most important thing that I did, because it ended up giving me the score that I needed to apply for an accelerated program. If you're applying for an accelerated program, you need to have a 32 or higher. That's just, everybody kind of shoots for a 32, and then you just want to get a 32 or higher on the ACT. I didn't take the SAT, so it didn't matter for me. But I would say, yeah, kind of making sure that you start early on. My dad's really great with his, with my 4 younger siblings right now. He's already creating a plan for one of them to start studying when she's a freshman in high school. That's huge. You're not going to find that sort of support, in many places. So I think making sure that you have that support early on and you study early on is going to be the most important thing for doing well.
Okay, thank you. And is the medical school application similar to other regular school application? you're gonna take SAT or MCAT, and also like how about the essays? Are they same? Or what's the difference in the application?
I think I can answer this because I took that route. So basically, it's pretty much the same. You have a common application essay, right, describing who you are, whatever you want to tell colleges, and then each single school has their own supplement essay. Why you want to go there specifically? They have their own. They have a bunch of essays per school that you have to write. 250 words, 500 words, whatever. But when you're applying to a lot of schools, it does add up. And, you want to be able to talk specifically about each school, do your research on it, know specifically why you're going there. Because they can call, they can see, they can like call you out in terms of like, or not call you out. They can see if you really want to go there or not, if you're just, throwing it in there. So those are really important. But all in all, I think it's pretty much similar. It's medical school. So you want to write about certain things and you want to write about your medical experiences. But other than that, it's pretty much the same.
I think it's easy to talk about what you should not write in your medical school essay, and what you should not write is, I've always wanted to be a doctor because I've always wanted to help people. They're going to get so many of those essays. They read that, they read thousands and thousands and thousands of those, and there needs to be a more unique reason. I remember during my medical school interview, someone asked me, do you think that your job is better than a janitor's? And I actually answered with no, because I thought at the time, oh, they're trying to ask me if I think doctors are better than other people. And I said no. And he was like, then why are you here? Why don't you become a janitor? And I was like, whoa, that's, I'm in the wrong place. But, I realized in that moment, you have to have a really good reason. And it has to be genuine. And I think making sure your essay making sure your essay stands out is very, very important. They filter a lot of people out by their essays. And now I'm at the end of the road. So, I've finished the majority of my residency interviews, and I'm on my last one this coming week. And I can say confidently that some of my interviews, the only reason I got them was because of my essay. And the interviewers told me that in my interview. My scores were on par with other people. They were just average, but it really was the essay that made them want to interview me. So I think making sure that when you're applying, you're writing something that's unique, that kind of stands out and that really shows who you are and why you want to do it is very, very important.
I'd like to add one thing also. On the other side of the spectrum, I agree, the essay is super important. It has to be unique, definitely unique, has to stand out. But as I said before, so I'm speaking from my own personal experiences now. So when I was applying to medical school, I applied super late, later than most people. Like I was 4 months late, and that's when everyone was getting their interviews. But long story short, I applied and I got waitlisted a couple of schools, or one of the schools actually, I called them and I ended up talking to the director of admissions. And I said, hey, you mind looking at my application? I was waitlisted. I really want to go to your school. She looked at it, and when she reviewed it, she's like, oh, wait, it seemed like she didn't even read anything. She's like, you actually have a lot of cool experiences in here. It's really impressive. And I said, okay, so if it's impressive, why can't I get in? I kind of like pissed in a nice way, but I basically asked her, and she said, your scores, your MCAT, your MCAT wasn't good enough. And that's when I realized, even if your essays are great, even if your extracurriculars, even if your whole application is great, if you don't have that one score, they're not, that's the cutoff. And obviously there's exceptions to that, but I realized that, my friend also has had the same exact experience. He had a guaranteed acceptance to a school. He didn't make the MCAT cutoff, and then they didn't take him. So what I would say is definitely invest your time in taking, like Saniyam said, taking those tests, even if it sucks, do it. And I hate standardized testing, but now I realize I wish I did that. And now I'm preparing for the boards, right? And I'm changing my whole mindset towards it because I now see how important these tests are in terms of medical school.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. So when they look at your medical school application, and it's the same thing for residency, they can say, I want, an MCAT score of blank, or I want a USMLE step 1 score of blank. They will put that in, and then they will not see any of the other applications that have scores below that. you won't even, I mean, they won't even see your name. You'll just be put in a trash pile and they just never see that. And so I had a school where, actually it's my last residency interview where because personally, so I didn't do, you know, as well as I wanted to on step 1, but then I blew it out of the water on step 2 and ended up doing very, very well. And because of my step 1 score, I ended up being phased out of all of these, you know, applications that one of the schools that I wanted to go to was looking at. And so I had kind of like you did, I sent them an email and I said, hey, I really, really, really want to go here. Just please look at my application. And so they had to take me out of that, you know, little group of applications that they never look at. And they were like, oh, you know, sounds like you're a cool person. We'll interview you. So I think that's really important to note as well. It's about having the full package, the scores, and then also being an interesting person.
Thank you. Seems like the standard tests are really important. So do you have any advice on like how to get a high score and on those tests?
So again, I can't speak about the MCAT, but I can speak about maybe the ACT. I think it's really important, again, just to study early and to study often. You know, maybe don't study all the time if you're taking it in 2 years, you know, but to make sure that you're familiar with it. And then just take as many practice tests as you can. I think I ended up spending in medical school $1,000 on practice tests alone. I think I've taken I just counted it not too long ago. I've taken over 40 practice tests in the past 2 years alone, just for you know, my boards. And you also have mini boards. Actually, you've got your little, they call them NBMEs, but anyway, it's for every subject. I think just making sure that you're studying early and often, you're taking as many practice tests as you can is really the key. And then ask someone who didn't get the score that you wanted on step 2 and ended up doing very well on step 1 and then ended up doing much better on step 2. I think it's important to know that if you don't get the score that you want the first time, just use it as a learning experience and move on.
So yeah, I think that's definitely the path to take in medical school. But if you're trying to get into medical school, for example, like the SAT, you know, as Henry said, also you want to practice that as much as possible. When it comes to these standardized testing, it's kind of like a game. You know, it's the way you take it, right? You just have to practice. Now, I didn't do well in SAT that well, actually, compared to my peers. You know, a lot of my peers in college and undergraduate, they all had perfect scores in SAT. And when I asked them, like, hey, how'd you do it? They're like, they said, we just gamed the system. Like, we just learned how to take it. There's like tutors who teach you how to do it. So you can just do that and then get your perfect score. And so many people do it. You know, it takes practice and it takes time, but you can easily do it. It doesn't require you to be smart or like super, you know, quick, you know, none of that. And same thing with MCAT. MCAT is a little different. It's more reading comprehension. So you definitely have to be someone who's, you know, if you're good at reading, you're going to be good at that test. Obviously, you have to study a little bit, but when you go through your undergraduate coursework as a pre-med, it will prepare you for the MCAT. Then you have to do a little prep work. But if you're able to read well and quick and you can comprehend it, you'll do well in that test. Now with medical school, the boards, the USMLE step 1, step 2, that is pure, you know, practice test. Content, you know, you have to know your content really, really well. And I'm in the process right now. Obviously, I didn't go through the whole thing. Sonia knows more than me. But in my opinion, you know, it's just a lot of content and you have to be able to churn it out. But yeah.
Okay. So my last question is about, like, we all know that medical tuition is so high, so expensive. So how did you guys afford it?
Scholarships and loans, really important. And then of course I had, you know, help from my family, which I am so blessed to have. I know that not everybody will have, you know, help from their families, but I think applying to as many scholarships as you can, even if it says we only accept applications from plumbers, you apply for it. I mean, you apply to every scholarship that you can, regardless if you feel that you're qualified or not, because someone may bite. So I think making sure that you're on top of that. And then loans. I mean, at the end of the day, medical school in some ways is a sacrifice, and you just kind of have to take out the loans and just believe that you will repay them at some point. So I think, you know, kind of knowing that going in it's going to be expensive and kind of being willing to take out those loans if you need to, I think is something that everybody kind of has to think about.
Yeah, so for undergrad, you know, you have a lot of opportunities for scholarships also. You have financial aid, so the better school you get into, most of the times, they can give you more financial aid. There's merit-based, you know, financial aid, there's non-merit-based financial aid, need-based. So you just have to be willing to aim as high as possible if you need that financial aid. Obviously, apply to many scholarships as possible outside of what the school offers. And then for med school, you know, everyone's taking loans pretty much. You know, you're going to be drowning in debt, but I think it pays off at the end of the day. So that's just the reality of it.
One really good resource, or two really good resources, if you're currently in college and you're going to apply, is call your financial aid and scholarships office and just say, hey, where's, like, do you guys have a general application for scholarships? And they will, you know, you can then apply for that, and then it'll be sent out to a bunch of different scholarships. So definitely using that resource is important. And then number two is calling your cities. Like if you call your city council, or if you have a council member in your city that you know, or even if your city has a page, a lot of times cities or counties have scholarships for high school students. They also have scholarships for undergraduate students who are living in that city. A lot of times no one knows about those scholarships, so they kind of just go unapplied for. And so that's the way that I ended up getting, you know, and I applied for a lot of little scholarships and ended up getting like, you know, $2,500 from 4 different scholarships, but no one else was applying for those. So making sure you know, call those 2 places is, I think those are really good resources.
Thank you. I think we are gonna leave the rest of the time for our Q&A session. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to send your questions in a chat, or you can also unmute yourself and ask your questions.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'm currently a freshman in college, and I was wondering, like, when should I start taking MCAT practice tests?
Yeah, so not until you're most people take their MCAT end of junior year. That's because they're fresh on all the material. You know, you want to take organic chemistry, biochemistry, all your basic sciences. So you want to be able to develop that knowledge base and then take the exam. So I wouldn't start anytime soon. You know, right now you want to focus on, as a freshman, just doing well in your classes, you know, developing your support system, your friends, do some fun things that you're interested in. Don't worry too much about freshman year. Sophomore year is when you start looking for research opportunities and lab bench work. You know, it could be clinical work. You want to do that. And then when junior year comes around, you start to sort of solidify your information. At the end of the junior year or mid-junior year, you're taking your MCAT practice test, whatever, and most people take it at the end of the junior year. If you're planning on doing a gap year, you can take your MCAT your senior year. So that's generally the process that people go through.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Excuse me.
Okay.
Can I ask one quick question?
Sure.
Actually, I'm listening to you guys. You all, like, just from the the high school, then go to college or med school. If someone like me, they already have some kind of medical school background from somewhere else, and then still doing some kind of healthcare related things in, like, I'm from Canada actually. So yeah, someone like me, they still keep doing healthcare science in different area, but want to go back to the med school. Is there any options or any, like, for me, I'm a little bit aged, so shortcut kind of way, if you guys can give me a suggestion or little advice. So thank you.
Sure. So I will say not a lot of shortcuts available. You know,
Yeah, that's honest answering.
not a lot of shortcuts available. I think that the biggest shortcut will be applying to an accelerated program. But unfortunately, those accelerated programs are only open for people who do not have an undergraduate degree. You can, you know, apply for traditional med school as someone who is non-traditional, and that's totally fine. We have actually 2 students now in my program. One is in her 40s, so she is certainly non-traditional. One is in her late 30s, certainly non-traditional. So it happens all the time. I think, like other applicants, what you can bring to what you can bring to the table that is unique and something that you should prioritize when you're talking about yourself in your interviews and in your application is saying, I have X, Y, and Z experience. This is what sets me aside from, you know, other applicants. And then making sure that your scores are really good, I think will be important. That's all I can give.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Do you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah. So how can you like manage your stress once you get to like the ACTs or the SATs?
That's an awesome question. I think it's just important to have some you time. You know, if you are feeling really stressed out, it's important to take a break. For me, I know that when I was studying, and, you know, I remember there was one week where my dad and I just sat down and I did ACT practice tests back to back for 5 days straight. It was absolutely stressful, but I think making sure you have techniques, you know, if you need to take a 5-minute break, take a 5-minute break. If you don't feel like you are studying well that day and you're not getting any information to your brain, you've already been studying for hours, just take the day off. I mean, at that point, just stop. Nothing that you're going to be doing is going to be helpful in the next couple of hours. So knowing your limitations, knowing little things that you like to do that kind of bring you back to reality, and then taking some you time and doing those healthy things will be really important. And also, you know, eat well, exercise, that's all important as well.
I'd like to say one thing also. So in my experience, you know, when you're at the end of high school, you're doing your SAT, ACTs, you're trying to apply to colleges, it gets pretty stressful in terms of just like, you don't want to do it anymore. Like, that's how I felt sometimes. But what my dad will always tell me is that you're at the end, like, you know, when you're racing at the finish line and sort of you go through that last sprint, but after you're done, you feel so good. You're backpedaling, you're having a good time. And for me, I really want to get out and, you know, explore, you know, different states and do things. So for me, it was just like, okay, I have to get through this. It's like literally a month or 2 or 3 months that, you know, it's going to be tough. And then once you're done, it really pays off. So it's also your mindset. You know, obviously the thing Sanyam said is very important, doing a practice test, finding you time, but your overall perspective on everything is very important. I want to get to the best college possible. I want to be the best possible. You know, as Uyghurs, we should be striving to be the best for ourselves and our people and our situation and everything. So if you think about it like that, it's okay, I got 3 months. I'm going to put all my work into it. After that, I'm chilling. You know, I'm relaxed. I'm good. I did my best. In that regard, you know, that stress is going to be there. But in order to manage it, you have to have the right mindset, this is part of, you know, the process. And everyone goes through this. So, yeah.
I believe in you.
Thank you.
Is middle school important at all? Is there like something that we should like start preparing in middle school?
You know what? I will say that the fact that you're even on this call as a middle schooler thinking about this stuff is enough. But I think you're doing great. There's nothing you can really do in middle school to prepare you for what will come next. But as long as you have those goals and you're thinking about them, I think that's really important. I think something that I haven't talked about that I think applies to everyone, no matter how old you are. Medical school is a decision that everybody should make with a lot of thought. It is a hard school, you know, process. It's the classes will be hard, the tests will be hard, the information will be nothing like you've ever seen before. What you learn in your high school biology, undergraduate biology class, it comes nowhere near what you will end up learning, after, when you're studying for your boards. But it doesn't end there. Residency is very hard. I mean, I applied for general surgery, and it's known as probably the hardest residency in all of the residencies that exist. And after you're done with that, it's still hard. The lifestyle is hard. You choose a specialty where you could be working, 24-hour days, even when you're not a resident. So I think making that decision and sticking with it and having a goal in mind is so important. So whoever asked the question, I can't see your camera anymore, but the fact that you're in middle school and you're thinking about these things, kudos to you. That is awesome.
I want to share one thing also, just for people, if you're not entirely sure about med school, don't do it because your parent tells you to do it. I think a lot of us share that experience where people want us to be doctors, and then we're not entirely sure. It's like, yeah, I'm not interested in anything else, so I'm just going to go to med school. It's going to be hell. It's not going to be hell, but it's going to be tough. And you won't, if you don't enjoy it, then it's going to be super tough. And me personally, I didn't want to go to med school actually undergrad, like senior, junior year. I decided not to go. I just took the MCAT for whatever reason, because I already signed up for it. I ended up taking 2 gap years. I did a bunch of other things, worked in like the corporate world for 6 months. I didn't like it. I know it's just kind of like alhamdulillah, has so many opportunities. I'm very grateful for being able to explore different opportunities. Not everyone's in the same situation as me. But then I did like a restaurant business. Then I went to like gemstone jewelry business. And I realized I didn't like anything. What I was passionate about at the end of the day was the human body, was helping people, was all these things that I was passionate about when I was younger. And I rediscovered that. But if I hadn't gone through those 2 years where I realized what I wanted, then I probably wouldn't like med school as much. So you have to sort of understand what you're doing. It's really tough, as Saniyam said. It's tough, and you gotta want it. You gotta want to do it. And don't do it as if your parents are just telling you to do it. Although it's a great career, but definitely you have to have your own passion for it.
Thank you. I think somebody asked, like, how did you make that decision, or your parents did? Because Tanya was talking about, like, you have to think it through before you make that decision. So did you want to take this question?
So again, I did a 6-year program. So you get accepted into medical school right out of high school, and it's a big responsibility. It's a big decision. People in my program drop out. We have a 20% attrition rate, about 20%. And so, I mean, people decide it's not for them all the time. I'll be completely honest. I did not want to be a doctor. That was not my goal. I didn't think I wanted to do it. I told my dad, I want to go to law school. I want to be the next, I want to be the president of the United States. Clearly, I am not the president of the United States, and I did not go to law school. But I ended up taking that risk, kind of at the end of the day. When I was a senior in high school, I ended up realizing, okay, my parents are going to help me pay for college. College is super important. I'll just, try, I'll go to UMKC for their 6-year med program. And if I don't like it, then I can always leave. Ended up getting into it, so my program's a little bit different. So we see patients day 1. And so my 2nd week of medical school, I took a blood draw. And that for me was like the end of it. It wasn't that I was helping people. I'll be totally honest about that. If you want to help people, there are a million jobs out there that help people. My dad works in pharmaceuticals, and he used to be a PharmD. They help people. But it was that I was somewhere that I was doing something very important that no one else could do. That in a situation where it's life or death, you're the only person that people are going to look to for any help. And that for me was huge, because kind of like oqush said, you should be excelling in every part of your life, especially as Uyghur people. That's what we want. And what other way to excel than be the most, be the most equipped person in any situation. So yeah, my parents did make that decision for me. And I was actually very honest about that in my medical school interview, which I think is why I got in because they asked me why I wanted to go to medical school. And I said, well, my parents said it was a really good thing to do. And I agree with them. I think this is a logical decision. I want a good job that I don't need to be, always looking for a job. And I know that this is something that I would be good at. So I think, making that decision and realizing, yeah, maybe it is a little bit is based off of your parents, but at the end of the day, once you really do it and once you're in it, I think for some people, if it's really what they want to do, they end up sticking with it. And not everyone will have the best reason to go into medical school when they do. Some people will end up dropping out. But as long as you've got a reason that you feel like you can stick with and you are goal oriented, I think that it ends up working out for most people.
Thank you. Berna asked, what preparation do you think students should take in order to have a better chance to get into medical school? I think we talked about this, but always if you can briefly answer it, it would be great.
Sure. Preparation wise, like I said, there are a couple of things I think are super important from my own experience. Scores. Right, you want to do well in the MCAT. You want to have good grades. If you don't have good grades, right, a lot of people go through undergrad. They realize they want to go to med school. They do something called a post-bac, which is like you take 1 year or 2 years. Usually it's 1 year. You from like other classes and you boost your GPA. And then people take MCAT courses or they boost their MCAT score. So there's a reason why people do that, because it's probably the most important thing when colleges look at you. And then you want to have, your extracurriculars, whatever you do on the side, and you want to present yourself in the best way possible. But I would say, from my experience, focus on your grades. You got to get, good GPA, good scores, and then that should help you.
Thank you. Abdulsaga asked, is publications helpful for med school applications? If you have publications.
Yeah, so I wish I got a publication. What happened with me was I didn't like research at all. I worked in the lab for like a year, and I just dropped out of it because it wasn't for me. But if I were to go back, I would stick with it and get myself on the paper, because that helps so much. So yes, being on, having your name on the paper, working on a project, spearheading a project, all these things, med schools love it, and I know residencies love it also. So. I think I would definitely say, try and find a research team when you're in college, stick with them for 2-3 years, get your name on a couple papers, if anything, or one if anything. And yeah.
My program has something called the High School Scholars Program, which I'm hoping my little sister can join me for a summer here in Kansas City to do. Because they talk a lot about that stuff. If you're applying for an accelerated program like my program, we have different things that we look for in candidates, of course. But I know that some of my colleagues, when they applied, they had already done a year of research in high school. So you should look at your local college if you're a high school student and see if you can get on a research team. They are totally, willing to have a high schooler do that in their senior year and their junior year. There are different one-year programs you can also apply for. I know Washington University in St. Louis is a great school, and they have a 1-year research experience that they offer for high school students to make them more marketable for undergrad or accelerated medical programs. When you apply to residency, research is so important. I'm writing 2 manuscripts that I'm actually going to be submitting for publication here in the next month. And I've already had, publications and research, posters and that sort of thing. If you're going into medicine, research will be something that will just be a part of your life. So I think getting involved early and even if you don't like it, doing it early on is important.
Thank you. Any questions? I guess no more questions. Okay. Kaysar asked, not sure if I missed it, but what kinds of community service or clinical volunteering experience did you guys have?
So when I applied, and again, this is different because it's, you know, an accelerated medical program, I did not have a lot of clinical experience. I think this goes to show that it's more about the quality versus quantity of things that you do. You can have a lot of, you know, hours volunteering for nursing homes and, you know, hospitals and stuff like that. But for me, you know, I had different things that I had won awards in. So, you know, United States Senate Youth Program, you know, speech and debate. These are not medical things, but they were things that I excelled at. I did do community service for different organizations in my city. I think that is I mean, you know, volunteering can never hurt you. But it isn't, I will say it doesn't make or break your application. That's what I think. I think having it there is important to show that you do it. But you don't need to have, you know, 1,500, 2,000 hours. You know, and other programs actually require that, but for medical programs, I haven't quite seen that, but I can't really talk that much about those requirements.
I think that's a great question, what Kaysar asked. So regarding clinical hours, you know, as it's not that important. Some people rack up thousands of hours thinking it's going to make, you know, a difference, but there's not much you can do as an undergraduate or high school student. Scribing is really, really good. You know, you get a lot of exposure to the fields. You learn a couple of things here and there. So scribing would be a good experience. But regarding community service in general, definitely do something unique. Like, I know a lot of people do small things here and there, but I had a friend who, for example, would teach in the Ithaca, the upstate New York prisons. And med schools love that. They love that because he's going to a certain population, teaching what he knows, and teaching is huge. Med schools love teaching, by the way. You know, if you teach as a tutor or like a you know, TA or anything really, because that shows you're able to sort of you know, be a mentor / communicate well / put things in layman's terms or easier terms to understand. So it's a great experience to have. And for me specifically, I knew this helped my application more than anything. Was I worked with underserved, you know, first of all, Uyghur community, you know, a lot of refugees. I worked with youth, like a lot of low-income youth. And this was just something that was based around my identity of being first-generation Uyghur, understanding, you know, the concept of asylees, political asylum, you know, trying to help other people kind of like us. And people did ask about that in my interviews and stuff like that. So that plays a big part also. So it doesn't have to be purely medical or clinical. It just has to be something you're genuine about, and it does translate to medicine.
Okay. Okay. Fayzullah Zaydun asked, does your high school's ranking matter? Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. You know, when undergraduate colleges, or if you're talking about medical school, probably not from a traditional way. But if you're doing accelerated program, maybe. Even if you're applying to undergrad, you know, your high school ranking doesn't matter that much. If your high school ranking is based on grades, maybe, because grades do help. But I know when I was in high school, you know, my grades were not the best in the school, but I did have a unique application. And especially top undergraduate schools, they look for like 3 things, maybe like super rich kids, which is the reality, you know, a lot of these rich kids, they have parents that went there or whatever. Then there's like unique, you want to have a unique application. I think we have a very unique situation. We have a unique culture. We have a unique experience in America. So these things, when you speak to it, colleges, they love it. And they definitely do weigh that with importance. But yeah, that's all I have to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, for my program, my accelerated program, I don't think your high school ranking really matters. The things that, if if there's anything that you can take away from this, it is that the things that are standardized matter. Your grades, your rankings, that cannot be standardized among high schools because every high school in the United States will be different. Every college in the United States is going to be different as well. But the things that they can standardize, like your MCAT score, your ACT, your SAT, those are the things that they're going to look at because they can compare you to other people that way. They can't really compare your, high school ranking. You probably don't want to be, the bottom 25th percentile in your class. You still want to do well, but it won't be the thing that makes or breaks you.
Thank you. I think Ulghar asked, how does your personality affect your essay for your college application?
I would, I can only speak to getting into, I guess, undergraduate programs. And then, because I applied to 12 schools. So I wrote essays that were different for every school. I think knowing your audience is really important. So since I had applied to 12 schools and only one of them was an accelerated program, my essay was different, not only for every college, but also for UMKC's accelerated program, because I knew I wasn't going to be talking about the same things. And then now that I've applied for residency and, I'm at the end of that process, my essay was also different for a lot of the programs that I applied to. It was different for, regional programs versus programs on the West Coast. You have to have something in your personality that ties you to whatever you're applying for. If it's medicine, talk about something that, talk about maybe an experience that you had that made you feel like this is what you wanted to do. Talk about something that you think is unique that would make you a good fit for medicine or for that school. But if it's going to be, you just want to stay away from generic. You don't want to say, I want to do this because, I've always wanted to be a doctor. I think I've said that before, because everyone will say that. So making sure your personality shines through in some way. I always say, take a risk, because not a lot of people are going to be taking risks. And if you're the person that's taking a risk and saying something that's unique, it's probably the one time that those people have read your essay. I talked about, my mom's polo in my essay for residency. So here I am, that's just, you got to do something that's unique. And I think doing those unique things will definitely set you apart.
But by the way, undergraduate colleges love that, like the intersection between culture, food, and your experience and self-actualization, especially for people like us, we're like the first people born, a lot of kids here are born in America or elsewhere, if you're applying to US schools. That whole thing, even a plate of langmen or a plate of pulao or is an act of resistance. Maintain your culture is act of resistance to a current day genocide. When you put language like that, they see that you're able to understand nuance, stuff like that. And I've seen a lot of essays from Uyghur kids who got into really good schools, and that is really good. I would say take that advice, definitely.
Thank you. Any questions?
I actually do want to add something that I think is important here. There are MD programs, which will be your allopathic medical school, so that you'll become a doctor. You will be licensed to apply for any residency that you want. There are multiple different residencies. I think sometimes it's kind of unclear as to how medical school works. So you do the 4 years, and during those 4 years, you take 2 board exams, step 1 and step 2, and then you apply for residency. So at that point, you have to choose what kind of doctor you want to become. And then whatever residency you choose, you could have, anywhere from 3 years to 5 years. And then if you want to become even more specialized, you could, have to be, doing residency for much longer. And so I think sometimes that's not so clear. There are DO schools, which also allow you to become a doctor. You get extra training in, I think, osteopathic manipulation, which is really cool. And then there are also different programs for other things. You can become a doctor of podiatry, so DPM. You could become a foot surgeon. They are literally surgeons, but they only work on the feet. There are schools for that. You would become a DPM. You can, become a nurse practitioner. There are other paths to becoming a healthcare provider, not only medical school. And I think sometimes knowing those different things and the different opportunities out there, it makes it easier for people to choose things that fall in line with what you want to do.
Okay, thank you.
Can I add one thing to that? Just so this is just like a dose of kind of realness speaking from someone in osteopathic medical school. Your first goal, I feel like, if you want to do, for example, specialize in something, try and get into MD program, straight up. You want to try and get into MD program because the way it works traditionally in America, MDs have more sort of reputation / credentials in terms of how people perceive them. Osteopathic programs are generally easier to get into. So what a lot of times people do, well, in my experience, so for me, I applied super late, so I just ended up applying to osteopathic program. But the training is great. You learn extra things, and you'll find DOs or osteopathic physicians who are chief surgeons, anesthesiologists, great doctors. They work side by side with MDs. The residencies are pretty much the same now. They merged them together, so there's practically no difference. But I would say that from my struggles as a DO and other people's struggles, first case is try and be an MD in terms it'll open up more doors, at least before. Right now it's a little different, but I think that would be my piece of advice if you are aiming to get into med school. But whatever you do, don't go to I guess that you don't want to go out of state. I mean, out of the United States for med school either, because then getting into residency is super hard. And I know, Sonia, if you want to add anything to that, but that's just a piece of real advice that I'd give beforehand, just to make your life easier when you're in med school.
Yeah, I think that's something that's really important to know, is that you are not a doctor when you graduate medical school. You're just not. You have to do a residency. You are not licensed to prescribe medications or do surgery or do your field if you graduate medical school. And I think sometimes we don't really think of that. We think that, just going to medical school, you finish the 4 years and then you're a doctor. And so I think, that is something to think about. If you're going to an out-of-state medical school like Ross University or one of the Caribbean, I don't think Ross is actually, but if you're going to one of the Caribbean medical schools, you have less of a chance of getting into residency. You still can. People do it all the time. It's just harder. If you go, to a DO school, you can still get into residency. I think DOs, I actually have a lot of friends who are DOs. You can get into residency. It's just harder. So kind of knowing the difference between those different programs and choosing the school that's best for you, I think that's important.
Thank you.
I actually have a question. Can I go ahead?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I'm not personally studying pre-med, but I have a classmate who's studying pre-med, and she recently changed her decision where she wants to study out of state. So she's not out of state, actually out of the country, because she noticed obviously we're gonna be in debt regardless, so we're studying medical school. And so she wants to study in a international medical school because obviously it's cheaper. So I was gonna ask, what are the the fallbacks, or what are some of the things that she should be on the lookout for, or to not actually study internationally, because I know there's a lot of problems with that.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm really passionate about this actually, because I'm like I've said, I'm at the end of I'm at the end of my interview season for residency, and going to an out of country medical school is not so important for getting into medical school. It's more important for what you are going to do once you graduate. So getting into residency. And getting into residency is really the hard part. I mean, that is the hardest part of medical school. You go 4 years and then it almost feels like you're applying for medical school all over again. I would say if they can stay here and just eat the debt, I mean, they should do it. Staying here and getting your MD or getting your DO here is definitely far superior than going out of the country. Because right now, I mean, I know people who have applied for residency who are applying as foreign medical graduates. You can actually look at the statistics. Most programs will look only at MDs. They won't even look at DOs, and they won't even look at foreign grads. And so knowing that, you know, debt would be the only reason to leave, it's at the end of the day, I don't think it's a good enough reason.
Yeah, but she or your friend definitely has to just accept the fact that, you know, debt is part of it, and it's well worth the investment. Going out of the country, like in my school, we have a program where foreign doctors, you know, we have neurosurgeons, we have like people who worked in like war zones, like really bright doctors. They got 99th percentile in step 1, step 2, and they still couldn't match in residency for a variety of reasons. But it's super tough. It's super tough. So, you know, they take precedent. Programs take precedent over U.S., United States graduates and med school programs over, you know, even like great doctors from abroad and great like med school graduates from abroad. So definitely stay in the States.
Thank you. Şerifədə sualınız bo'lsa o'zingiz so'ramsiz, Uyg'urcha so'rsangiz ham bo'ldi. Okay. It's all right. If no one has any more questions, probably we will end our session here. It's been such a pleasure being with you here to talk to you about medical school, and thanks so much for sharing your experiences, and thanks for taking your time to join us here today, and thanks for the questions. Yeah,
I put my email in the chat box. If anybody has any questions, just wants to email me.
Thank you. All right. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you so much.
It was nice to meet you.
Thank you. You guys are awesome.
Thank you so much.
We are proud of you.
Allah manat.
Bye, Sandhya.